The Civil War. Major battles. There were countless battles throughout the Civil War, but there were several that made a lasting impact on the course of the Civil War. The First Battle of Bull Run was fought in Manassas, Virginia in July of 1861. The North believed that an easy victory here would allow them to quickly take Richmond, which was an important city for the Confederacy. So the North really thought, this is going to be an easy victory. We'll quickly be able to take Richmond. We're going to be making a good start in this war. There were actually spectators that came and picnicked in the grass at the battle site because they thought it would be over so quickly and would be such an easy win. However, led by Stonewall Jackson, who actually earned that nickname during this battle, the South won a shocking victory, so the North did not have things go the way that they planned. As a result, the South became somewhat overconfident. And the North realized it was in for a long war. So the North had been thinking, this is going to be easy. We outnumber the South. We've got a lot more supplies than they do. We've got factories. We've got a lot of the materials we need. The North had a lot of advantages, but the South had some pretty good generals, and the South also was fighting primarily in their territory. So the South had some advantages as well. So Stonewall Jackson led the South to a shocking victory at the First Battle of Bull Run, and this let the North know that they were in for a long war. At the Battle of Shiloh in Tennessee in April of 1862, Ulysses S. Grant led the Union to its first major victory, and Grant was the general in charge of all the Union troops. At the Second Battle of Bull Run, so back where we started in Manassas, Virginia, but in August of 1862, Stonewall Jackson again defeated a Northern army. This time under the command of Robert E. Lee, who was the general in charge of all of the Confederate troops. At the Battle of Antietam in Maryland in September 1862, Confederate General Robert E. Lee went on the offensive, hoping to bring Maryland into the Confederacy, sever the channels between Washington, D.C. and the North, and attract the recognition of the European powers. This was the bloodiest battle of the Civil War and ended in a draw. So the South had won several important battles, but then the North did win some of the smaller battles. Now, at the Battle of Antietam, there wasn't really a winner. It came out to a draw, but it was a very bloody battle, so it seemed like both sides were losers in this particular instance. General Robert E. Lee tried to go on the offensive. He thought if he could go up north, take over Maryland, and bring it into the Confederacy. Maryland was a border state at that time that bordered Washington, D.C., so if he could take over Maryland and get it to join the Confederacy, he could sever the channels between Washington, D.C. and the rest of the North by taking over Washington, D.C. as well. And doing all this successfully would gain the recognition of the European powers. The South knew that it was outnumbered. It didn't have as many factories or as many raw materials to make what they needed as far as weapons and ammunition went. And so they knew if they were going to win this war, they were probably going to have help from Europe. So they were hoping to attract the attention of the European powers and show them that the South could be successful with a little help. However, neither the North nor the South won this battle. It came out to a draw and was the bloodiest battle of the Civil War. At the Battle of Fredericksburg in Virginia in December 1862, General Lee successfully repelled the attacks of the Union General Burnside. So this was another victory for the South. They had repelled the Union's offense. At the Battle of Chancellorsville in May 1863, which is in Virginia, Lee scored his biggest victory of the war. However, it was also during this battle that Stonewall Jackson was mortally injured by his own troops. So this was kind of a positive and negative for him. Lee scored his biggest victory at this battle, but he lost one of his most important generals when he was mortally injured by one of his own troops, or by his own troops. It wasn't something where he was taken down by a Union soldier. It was his own troops that took him down accidentally, and so he ended up dying due to those wounds, and General Lee lost one of his best generals. So he did win the battle, but he did lose that general. At the Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania in July 1863, the Confederate troops suffered a damaging defeat. So primarily, these battles had been won by Southerners. The Battle of Shiloh was a big victory for the Union, but the rest of these important battles had primarily been won by the South. The Battle of Antietam had come to a draw, but there weren't any other major battles that the Union had won. So at the Battle of Gettysburg, the Union finally won another big battle, and the Confederate troops suffered a very damaging defeat. General Lee had hoped to take some pressure off the South with a successful surge into the North. So he thought, okay, if I attack up north, then I'll get some troops to move up there and fight me there, and then the further south will have less pressure on it. There will be fewer soldiers there to fight. But instead, he got caught in an unfavorable tactical position and suffered massive casualties. So the Confederacy suffered massive casualties in this damaging defeat at the Battle of Gettysburg, and most historians believe the Union victory here to be the turning point of the war. So the North had kind of counted on winning. The North had over twice as many people, over twice as many soldiers, way more goods to manufacture weapons and ammunition, way more factories within which to do that. And so they thought this would be an easy battle. They realized right away that they were in for a long war. It wasn't going to be quick. It wasn't going to be a few quick battles and they're done. And the South had been actually winning a lot of major battles. But with the Battle of Gettysburg, historians consider this to be the turning point in the war, when the South started losing more of the major battles and the Union started winning more of them. After the Battle of Gettysburg, General Grant mounted a siege against the crucial Confederate city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, in July 1863. So this is the same month. And he goes ahead and launches a siege against Vicksburg. When the Confederates had finally been starved into surrender, the Union had complete control of the Mississippi River. So they didn't just go in and fight. They kind of held this city hostage and didn't let anyone leave, but didn't let any supplies come in. So eventually they had to surrender because there was no food left inside the city and people were starving. Whenever they did surrender, that gave the Union control of the Mississippi River. Between July and October 1863, the major southern rail hub of Atlanta was conquered and burned by General William Sherman's troops, another Union general. This victory guaranteed that Lincoln would be reelected in 1864. So this was another victory. It took a while, but the major southern rail hub of Atlanta was conquered. It was burned. That was going to be a major mode of transportation of goods and soldiers, food, any kind of equipment they needed was probably going to go through that rail station to get to other parts of the South. So once this hub had been destroyed, a lot of the South's communication and way of transporting goods was taken away. With this Union victory, it basically guaranteed that Lincoln would be reelected in 1864, and it also marked the beginning of Sherman's March to the Sea. Remember, William Sherman is the general who burned down Atlanta, and then he made his famous March to the Sea. It was a campaign of devastation mounted by the Union in late 1864 and early 1865. Sherman's path, or his troops, melted southern rails. So they'd already burned down the rail hub of Atlanta. They melted southern rails all throughout their path, and they destroyed southern crops and factories, creating a path of chaos that stretched from Atlanta to Savannah. So Sherman's March to the Sea was when he started at Atlanta. He burned that rail hub, melted the rails there, and then just started going toward the sea from there. And all along his path, he burned the southern rail lines. He melted them down so that the trains wouldn't be able to travel along them anymore, which was going to make for a lot of damage to repair in the future. And he also destroyed southern crops, so any source of food the Southerners might have is now lost, at least along this path. And he destroyed their factories, which meant that any way that they could create more weapons or more ammunition was now going to be gone as well. Any way they were going to be able to create more clothing and shoes for the soldiers, gone as well, at least along this path from Atlanta to Savannah. So there were a lot of battles throughout the Civil War, but these were some of the major battles that had outcomes that significantly affected the way the Civil War ended.